Hello and welcome to our second episode of Grow's Nurture series, where we invite multidisciplinary thought leaders to deliver talks that expand your knowledge about agri-food innovation. Today we have Adam Lyle from Padang & Co. giving his talk on food, the sustainability imperative through the lens of the SDGs. Adam is a co-founder and executive chairman of Padang & Co., an innovation catalyst that started in 2012. Padang drives the adoption of open innovation practices, matching startups and MNCs to enhance innovation capabilities, solve problems, and develop new opportunities. A sustainability practitioner and innovation specialist, Adam is passionate about the role that the agri-food tech sector can play in achieving the SDGs by 2030. To this end, Padang has launched thecountdown2030.com to track and stimulate conversations and drive meaningful activity in pursuit of the goals. Without further ado, let's welcome Adam. Adam,
hi, John.
Welcome.
How are you doing?
I'm great.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for being with us today.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much. The clock is ticking. It really is. By the time I finish this presentation, we're going to have around 9 years and 114 days to 2030. So there's not a lot of time left. And as John said in his intro, that's one of the reasons we introduced the countdown2030.com at the beginning of this year. Our concern was that just not enough people were focused on the SDGs. They knew about it, but as you know, things 10 years away, 30 years away, a lot of time people aren't focusing. Now, many of you listening, I'm sure, are very aware of the SDGs and their importance. Set up in 2015 as an action plan for people, planet and prosperity, that they have been working and being worked on very hard over the last 5 years. Unfortunately, we haven't been doing as well as we'd like. And of course, with COVID, we've really been knocked pretty badly. Much of the work in poverty over the last 10, 15 years has been pushed back. We're not quite sure where we're going to be. So we really have to get moving. Part of the issue from my point of view when I first came across the goals is they're pretty overwhelming. 17 goals, 169 targets. It's kind of, where do you start? So I've always been trying to work out to find a theme, a way I could sort of wrap my hands around it. What I figured was looking at the SDGs through a food lens makes a lot of sense. Why? Because food actually does, as I'll take you through in a little bit, it runs the whole way through the SDGs. And let's face it, agri-tech and food tech investment is hot at the moment, not just in the US, here in Asia. John and the folks at AgFunder and Grow are leading the charge in this area. So we all understand food, and it's something that we can make a difference about. Let's face it, most of us listening to this call eat 3 times a day. It gives us a sense, an opportunity to think about food, where it comes from, how we should be consuming it. It can make it very real. And quite frankly, considering what you eat, where it comes from, you can actually have a greater impact than perhaps just walking out of the room and turning off the lights and maybe turning off an aircon. Thinking about food can have an enormous impact in everything that we do. So let's just get a sense of, where we are before I dive into the SDGs. Now, we've all heard about 2050. And again, one of my issues, if we keep focusing on 2050, for many people that seems a long time away. But that's where a lot of the stats come from. We know that we've got issues with food and hunger in the world at the moment. By 2050, it's estimated that we need 50% more calories. The demand for animal feed is likely to increase by 70%. The extra land that we're going to need will be the equivalent of 2 times India. At the same time, today, livestock accounts for 80% of arable land, but delivers 18% of calories. 80% of arable land, 18% of calories. A third of cropland is used to feed animals. Beef accounts for 24% of meat consumption, yet uses 7 times the amount of land that poultry and pigs use, who provide 76% of meat consumption. The World Economic Forum's Nature report, released earlier this year, said that $44 trillion, about a half of the world's GDP, is at risk due to nature loss. 1 million species are at risk of extinction in the next few decades. Current food systems do not provide the world's population sufficient nutritious food in a sustainable manner. We need a balanced scorecard to better manage the system. Things are out of balance. Global food system is estimated at $10 trillion. However, the hidden costs are estimated at $12 trillion, the majority of those around health and environmental impacts. Again, we're out of balance. So I'd just like to walk you through sort of kind of my view of the SDGs through the food lens. Number 1 and 2, no poverty and zero hunger, are inextricably connected. 80% of the poor live in rural communities working in agriculture. 50% of the world's hungry are from farming families. 500 million smallholder farmers produce 50% of the world's food. Key to getting people out of poverty, reducing hunger, we've got to work with these smallholder farmers. How can we improve systems? How can we change some of the crops that they sow? How can we help them move from subsistence farming? Moving on to good health and well-being. Nutritious food is critical to it. Malnutrition is the largest contributor to disease in the world. Malnutrition affects 25% of children under the age of 5, which impacts school performance and brain development, creating a further obstacle to providing quality education. Number 4. And as we know, we miss out on gender equality, number 5, on many occasions. Women account for 43% of people in agriculture, yet they are denied ownership of land, access to tech resources, all of which impacts their livelihoods. Now, as we start to move to number 6, clean water and sanitation, we really start to also get at food. 70% of all freshwater withdrawals are due to agriculture. 70%. So again, where's the innovation? How can we help in terms of irrigation management, crop selection, a whole range of farming practices utilizing IoT and data to better manage water use? And of course, in this time of COVID, water is so important for managing hygiene among those most vulnerable. Food systems also impact number 7, affordable and clean energy. Modern food systems consume around 30% of the world's energy, and most of it is fossil fuel based, and particularly in Asia. Also, good work. Everybody's entitled to good work. Agriculture is the largest employer in the world. So we have to look for ways, how can we support more decent, more ethical work for all those in agriculture? Number 9, infrastructure is not adequate for effective storage and management of foodstuffs in many places. Also, 900 million people living in rural communities don't have access to electricity. Moving a little closer to home for many of us here in Singapore, number 11, sustainable cities. Now, we all know that by 2030, we're expected to see more than 60% of the planet living in cities. Mega cities and medium-sized cities, up to 5 million. So, of course, the opportunities for urban food production is going to be extraordinary and an opportunity to take advantage of. Again, food everywhere, every one of the SDGs has a food impact. And of course, with number 12, responsible consumption. Now, we all have heard the stat about food loss and waste, that it's around about 30% of all food produced, whether on farm or at consumer level. Number 12 targets actually a 50% reduction in food loss and food waste by 2030. Number 13, unlucky 13, climate action. Well, again, a stat that we're all too familiar with, that agriculture accounts for anywhere between 20 and 30%. Frustratingly, in many ways, agriculture is both a cause of climate change and, of course, now is experiencing the impacts of climate change. Crop yields are predicted to drop by 25%. We need to reduce emissions to reduce biodiversity loss. We also have to, again, look at what we're growing. 75% of our food comes from 25 crops and 5 animals. We need to rethink and look for alternatives and additions. Agricultural deforestation, boy, 30 million in 2016, which is a 50% increase on 2015, resulting in a loss of a carbon sink, which in turn impacts rainfall, acidification of oceans, ultimately impacting marine life. Which brings us to number 14, life below water. Fish protein at the moment only provides around 17% of the total animal protein we consume. So there's scope for more, but we are currently overfished. 30% of the world's fish are overexploited. We really have to look at better management of our oceans, not just from the plastics that we all perhaps think about, but how we're managing the oceans, wild fisheries, the development of aquaculture, such an opportunity, particularly here in Asia. Now, number 16, peace and justice, is one that people are, how does that fit in? But let's face it, poor systems of justice cause major food insecurity and conflict, which in turn, of course, causes refugees and ultimately another generation of undernourished people. Now, none of us can do this alone. We have to do it in partnership. No company, no government. It's got to be partnership, number 17. So, that's the list of the SDGs, me weaving through my elements of food and a little bit of what can be done. Now, what I would say, while it does seem like a long list, 17 goals, and yes, that can be intimidating, don't look at them as a list. I think what we need to do is to reframe them as a kind of an investment opportunity. Look at all of these, how do they knit together? How can we take action and enjoy the benefits while benefiting others? There's huge investment opportunities here. The Rabobank Temasek PwC report last year, Harvest the Future, estimated 800 billion investment in Asia over the next 10 years. The recent report from the Food and Land Use Coalition called Growing Better estimated the business opportunity by 2030, if it took certain actions, at being $4.5 trillion a year. 4.5 trillion. And it was focused on things like healthy diets, productive and regenerative agriculture, healthy oceans, diversifying protein supply, reducing food loss and waste, increasing stronger rural livelihoods. There's actually a very clear laid out plan of what one can be done. So we've got the sense of the goals, we've got the opportunities, now we've got the financial potential. So what we need to do next is have a different way of thinking about such things. Now, key to the future, I believe, is moving from design thinking to prosperity thinking. How do we see it all fitting together? So I'm very excited that Padang is working with the Future Food Institute from Bologna in Italy, who have a whole construct around this called Food for Earth, the Earth Regeneration Toolbox. And it's made up of a number of elements that work together and also map against the SDGs. The 5 elements that they have, which I think really just hit it, and it's so right on: food diplomacy, circular living, climate smart ecosystems, food identity, and prosperity. We do need to reinvent how we think about the SDGs and the way that food plays in it all for the benefit of all. I'm really excited. With such a toolbox in hand, we can take on the food challenges I've been outlining in a very systemic way. We can design new pathways to prosperity for people and planet. Food indeed is the sustainability imperative.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Masks off. And Adam, thanks very much for a really inspiring talk about the SDGs. I think you touched upon some really interesting aspects there. Let's dig a little bit deeper. We've got some questions that I'd like to explore with you.
Sure.
Firstly, in your opinion, what is the ecosystem currently lacking in order to achieve greater appreciation and engagement with the SDGs? I mean, is it perhaps more education or greater regulatory oversight?
Listen, I don't think it's so much regulatory oversight as such. Our concern last year was there were just not enough talk about it. Lots of corporations now are setting the SDGs very much a part of what they do. But I just didn't feel the conversation was strong enough. And so that's why we launched the countdown2030.com. But I think generally at times, I think as I perhaps said in the talk, for a lot of people, they just find it, what does it all mean? And so that's why I was trying to get that sense of how you can knit it together as a sort of a construct of how you go about doing your business. Because, I mean, 169 targets, if you dive into some of those, there's a lot of detail which won't be relevant to everybody. And so that's why I was trying to run the food through it. So I guess the short answer is it's kind of relevance to me, and also something around education and awareness. My big hypothesis was when we set that up was that now that it's less than 10 years, psychologically, everybody kind of gets that. That's not that far away. So I think we're going to, unfortunately, naturally, everyone's been focused on the pandemic. And so that while other people have been plunged into deeper hunger, so that's got things worse, other activities have been put on hold because of safety reasons or just other priorities, which you can understand. So we really do have to keep pushing quite hard.
Yeah. You talk about making the SDGs more relevant to the individual, and that could be, obviously we've seen a lot of activism recently from the younger generation, the millennials and Generation Z, etc. I think when you apply the SDGs to corporations or perhaps government, do you believe the ways in which these stakeholders in society are trying to measure their achievement or their aspiration towards the achievement of the SDGs, do you think this is effective, or do we need to be thinking about it in a new light? I mean, for example, you mentioned your partnership with Future Food Institute of Bologna to sort of rethink the framework a little bit.
Yeah, listen, I think I mentioned Balanced Scorecard. I'm a big fan of Balanced Scorecard, which came in, I guess, in the 90s. That's actually what brought me to Asia nearly 20 years ago, working in Taiwan on Balanced Scorecard for banks. But I think we need a sustainability or an SDG scorecard to kind of better balance what we're doing in different areas. So I do think measurement is always good. As we know, what gets measured gets done. With Future Food Institute, what I like about their toolbox, again, it focuses on, down to cultural identity and the role of food. So again, back to the point of relevance. Everybody gets food. And what does food mean to me? It's a common language for everybody. We understand, we respect one another through food. We respect the right of individuals to have the right nourishment. So I think it is constructs with Future Food. I'm really excited because their approach. Sarah Reversi, the founder, is this very inspiring woman. We've done quite a few webinars recently, and just so passionate about the subject. And again, she makes it very relevant for everybody in terms of the impact that you can have.
Yeah, you talk about obviously measurement, a scorecard, being able to better quantify, I guess, the delivery of SDGs and impact. I think you brought it up briefly in your talk. When you start talking about sort of from the investor's perspective and the sort of the role that the investment markets, capital markets can play in driving the SDGs, I think this is a topic which is very close to my own heart.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I've found when we combine sort of investment and sustainability in the same sentence, this debate often arises around the question of sort of commercial value. How does one ascribe value to sustainability? If you sort of put yourself in a startup's shoes, how might a founder, an entrepreneur who might be watching this today, think about leveraging sustainability as part of their narrative or customer value proposition for that matter?
Yeah, listen, I think when you use the word leverage, apologies, it kind of a little scary. Well, am I trying to use sustainability as opposed to, I think it's the North Star that we should all have. If what you're doing is not sustainable, it's not innovation in my view. Because to innovate means to do something new and different, connecting to dots to make things better. Ultimately, to follow your purpose. So, sustainability just has to be. It's just not on if you are undertaking activities that are not focused on doing it in a sustainable way. The world has too many problems, so that's just not on. And I think when you look at many of startups who are truly purpose-driven, and it's not just young people, it's my age group starting companies. The rise of purpose is very strong in society, and we're seeing it everywhere, which is really exciting. You match purpose and sustainability together with a great customer value proposition, and you've got a good business.
You've repeated that word many times, the purpose. I think it resonates a lot with me. I mean, I've got these sort of three key criteria which I sort of keep in the back of my mind when I'm speaking to a founder or evaluating a startup: purpose, passion, and persistence.
Yeah.
The grit, right?
3 Ps, yeah.
The 3 Ps. I mean, it's really sort of key metrics for myself when I'm looking at startups. But I think that resonates very strongly. I think just to put you on the spot here, perhaps one last question. You obviously walked us through all the SDGs and sort of defining them and connecting them to the sort of food narrative. If you had to choose maybe, your top one or two, your sort of the ones that you yourself would be most passionate about, which ones would those be?
Wow. If I had children, it's like being asked to choose your favorite child. But I guess when I'm talking about food, I guess it comes back logically to number 2, zero hunger, which also speaks to smallholder farmers, which is a personal passion of mine, and what Padang does, the work we do in ASEAN with smallholder farmers who, they are the backbone of our food chain. They provide the food for us, and they live pretty tough lives, and their families live tough lives. So I think anything we can do as innovators to give them better lives, greater share of the prosperity that everybody else is participating in, that would be great. If we remove hunger, then people are in positions to do so many other things. And I won't say they will look after themselves, but we all know if we have nourishment, we can do so much more.
That's brilliant, yeah. Thank you very much. I think that about wraps it up for today's session, but on behalf of all of us here, let's give Adam a warm round of applause and thanks. I appreciate you being here. Another fist bump. Awesome. Well, before we put our masks back on, let me just make a final reminder for everyone to sign up and tune in for our next episode of the Nurture series, which will be with Juliana Proserpio from Ecos, about designing desirable futures and how we can engage the multiple stakeholders to be co-creators and influencers of change. So tune in then, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much.